All right, welcome to Popular Liberty. It is April 22nd in the year 2022 of our Lord Jesus Christ, and we are coming to you with the second installment of the Post-Libertarian moment. This uh, this is something I really enjoy reading because I think you do such a good job of capturing what this thing is, what this thing is not, and this is what we're about to get into today. Is what is a real some hard definitions of what we're talking about,
Right.
and why why this movement or not really movement, why this moment exists, and what we're actually called, and because that's a big thing is we're always called post-libertarians, even though we're not.
Yeah, that's like the whole concept of defining this as a moment is and it's I'm a fan of saying there's at least two answers to everything, and like the post on the one hand, the post-libertarian moment happens every day when somebody who's interested in a certain set of ideas, changes their perception or decides to, call themselves something else. But then it's also particular, I think, to the 1-2 punch, as I was just saying yesterday or maybe this morning, of Donald Trump's election in 2016 and then the lockdowns of 2020. And I think politically speaking, right, this isn't about foundational economic ideas or anything like that, which is where this gets muddied. Politically speaking, I think those two data points really removes from the table the need for any kind of third party politics in America. And more importantly, it speaks to it requires people to take a different. I think it requires you to take a different approach to politics. If you and coming from a libertarian tradition, like you talked about like what you might call us, and I've been thinking about that because I don't really, my I guess you could say my politics are in a state of flux, but in the same time they're really not. It's kind of it's almost like moving beyond the need for labels in a certain sense. It's accepting that politics is about winning, and that's its own that's its own thing.
Yeah, I really like the way you just put that we've almost like moved beyond labels at this point, because it's almost gone to be to the point where it's not really ideological anymore. It's about it's like, yes, our ideology informs our goals still, but the means and methods that we're willing to employ to get there are not ideological, and they're not ideologically driven anymore. These are driven by basic economics and incentives. It's just a matter of what action gives us which result, and seeing that as a broad strategy across time. All we want is results, and we've moved past this point where we want to really define and spread this message about liberty. We're just let's go get it done. Yeah. It's not even liberty, it's just property. Yeah, we don't even need these labels anymore, but we do have that label praxian for praxis. We're trying to put these ideas into practice. That's what praxis it means. And so so for here, we're like, I like what we got here last time, and I want to go ahead and start where we left off at what it is. You want to go ahead and read it?
Yeah, sure. So we are not discussing a movement, but a moment. That moment occurs when, in the face of lockdowns, a libertarian sees dogmatic professions of faith and popular democratic political strategies as insufficient methods of stopping government and corporate tyranny. No one can actually be a post-libertarian. That's it. That's the whole concept here. Anything else is somebody labeling, anything else is somebody ascribing a pejorative to another group of people.
Yeah.
Those who are called post-libertarians go by the name praxian because their concern is not spreading a message, but achieving results. This is to say, without application, there is no point in theorizing what a perfect libertarian world would look like, nor is it useful to use that perfect libertarian world as a baseline for determining right and wrong. There is no encompassing Praxian solution, and Praxians are not monolithic. The authentic expression of being post-libertarian has been weaponized by people who pretend that the world hasn't changed since Ron Paul ran for president in 2008. Given the power of the post-libertarian moment, Praxians have inserted themselves at the center of libertarian discourse in less than a year. LPMC members, agorists, professional economists, and other high-profile libertarians have all taken turns criticizing the moment without understanding what it is.
That's a really good point. It's like I've never really heard good counter arguments to, what we actually say, and I get that a lot personally. To where once I started listening to you, it sounds like, oh wow, he actually makes a lot of sense. This is not at all what I thought he was saying. I thought this was just like some authoritarian right winger, and no, not at all. I'm actually explaining why we have these sorts of problems that we have right now. Why did this happen? And where all of the other explanations are really just like falling flat. They're just repeating talking points that they were repeating in 2012. I mean, that was like the kind of the final straw for me when I decided I'm going to get into this was, COVID was happening, and the same exact points that they could have been I love Dave, but he, on his show, he was making the same exact points, that he would have made in like 2000, 16. When I started listening to him in like late 2017 or somewhere around there. And like, these were the same points. It's like, I've heard all this before. This isn't, it's like, this clearly isn't helping. This isn't working. And
or how can we think it's like, so in particular, and we'll kind of get into this too. It's also, this is and this is tied to our other series on they have uncrowned him. And I've been really thinking about different segments of Christianity. And I've split them up into three, at least in my mind currently, the apostolic, which would be Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And then you have Protestantism. And then the third wave, we might say, is the evangelical Christianity. Now, I say that to say this, which is to say there is a certain evangelism within the kind of within that evangelical libertarianism, if you will, that we're actually responding against, because it is a libertarianism concerned, as again we'll kind of get we're going to cover this soon, but it is a libertarianism concerned only with the spreading of a message of liberty, right? And there's a time to, but as the good book says, there's a time to reap and a time to sow, right?
Yeah.
So there's a point where you have to change tactics.
Yeah, I mean, well, these guys, I call them the cult of Kinsella because they're that hyper autistic atheist branch of libertarianism that is really they've adopted libertarianism as their religion because they have a God-shaped hole in their heart and they're trying to fill that hole with something. And so when you see guys like Ace, or Stefan Kinsella on Twitter just like tearing into people and just be like, oh, that's not real libertarianism, or that's not logically consistent, or that's aggression or something like that, to basically every idea anybody comes up with. Like that, like these are people who have internalized this. They have a real sense of morality and they believe in a real morality from an atheist point of view, which is extremely inconsistent. I mean, this does not work at all.
Well, and
it's like
let's
there is no
split
real morality. This is just your opinion that you've internalized as your religion, and you should just go to church for God's sake.
Well, and the two people you bring up, I think we might bifurcate that as they're in two different weight classes. I would argue. And somebody like Kinsella, is interesting because I went on Mark Claire's show to talk about this essay, and he like got upset afterwards. It was like, I don't feel like I understand this any better now after listening to this interview. And it was kind of like, well, I mean, no, you just didn't like what you heard. Like, it was something about,
he didn't confirm your bias.
Right. And he latched onto like a part at the end where Mark was asking about like kind of like a semi-spiritual experience I had one night, like when I was out, and I took some edibles and stuff, like, and he kind of like took that and then used that to like completely disparage the entire point of the conversation of again, just how many of, caught up in the Ron Paul movement and like wanting to spread this message, again, this evangelism, as I was kind of conceptualizing it, at least myself. And then I separate that because I think I could if I like sat and had a beer with Stefan Kinsella, I feel like I'd smoke a cigar. I think he smokes cigars and drinks whiskey, and like that's right up my alley. You know what I mean? Like I feel like I could sit and have a conversation with him, and he might not agree with me, and he might say, "Well, you know, I've seen people like you come and go."
I think he would get royally ticked at you.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like I feel like we'd have.
If you weren't talking about libertarianism, you two would get along.
Yeah,
right. The moment because that's his religion. It's like I can tell you right now, that's his religion. If you touch it, he's going to get upset. Yeah. And that was why Ace always got so butthurt with me. Is I'm literally like drilling holes into the foundation of his religion, and you can see where I'm getting those holes from our other series, as you mentioned. That is, they have uncrowned him, and because that just like completely obliterates the foundations of liberalism just in the first like 3 chapters. And
right. Well, and like specifically to that atheistic liberalism as well.
Yeah.
Or we might even say, if we want to be maybe a little more, I don't know, less religious with the tone, because this just popped into my head, is like a systemized way of thinking without incorporating a metaphysics. And that's effectively what atheism in practice is, right? And certainly intellectualized atheism basically just forgoes the requirement to. And I say this like personally as somebody who like I left metaphysics alone. You know what I mean? I recognize that it's like an important part, but it hasn't been a big area of my exploration until recently, right? I'm more of an epistemology guy personally. But most libertarians, especially the atheistic kind, are ethics driven, and ethic is all about action. And it's funny because even like the concept of ethics, I think, recognizes the fact that there's like multiple ways that you can live, and like multiple applications of something, which is to say what you are talking about is not an absolute, but that's a philosophical discussion that I'm sure.
And ethics is all about, because it's all about action, it has to be founded on metaphysics. So if you're an atheist, you really have no business talking about ethics at all, because by definition, you don't believe in metaphysics. And that, which is like the science of causality, basically, or the philosophy, I should say, of causality. And that's one thing that causes another. And this was at the root of all my disagreements with Ace. It was that he and I have a very different metaphysics. I believe in abstract objects. I accept Platonism. He does not. Yeah. And because of that, it's like our worldviews are literally irreconcilable. He and I see the cause and effect of the world completely differently. And there's no point in having a conversation like that. And so when, like we're having like these sorts of discussions, it's like the people who really hate us the most are the ones who are like, you're hurting my religion. These are the people who always call us post-libertarians. Whenever you see someone out there, referring to the post-libertarians, you need to immediately say
the ism too, like post-libertarianism in particular. Yeah, that's because that's usually what they'll.
Yeah. It's like these are people who have internalized libertarianism as their religion, and even if they say they're Christian, no. What they've really done here is they've internalized this as their religion. They're seeing us attack their religion at its foundational level, and they're reacting accordingly. This is an anti-heresy meremism,
and they respond with apologetics, right? So it's activating the same kind of system it does. It's but it's like the 1-2 punch is that you also don't realize it, right? So like if I decided to take and be like, all right, well, I've rejected Jesus, and I'm going to go on an anti-Catholic screed now. You would be ready for it, and you would know it's coming. You would know it's coming, and you'd be ready to defend it. Whereas the person who doesn't recognize that they have faith, that they rely on dogma as like the basic way in which you can understand the world, that person when they're confronted with when they're confronted with
saved by property alone, it's like that's their faith alone, or scripture. And when they say scripture alone, we only need to be reading. If only people would read Rothbard, if only they would read Mises or Hoppe, if only they would read our sacred text, if only they would read the Bible alone. It's like, and don't listen to authority, don't listen to anybody else who has any sort of contrary fact. Our economics is not empirical at all. Therefore, it is not subject to any sort of counterfactual. And you can't possibly prove it wrong except by logic, and because that's where they feel most comfortable arguing, even when their logic actually doesn't really work all that well in theory, because again, they don't have a metaphysics. And with the exception of the Christians, of the Christian libertarians, they do, and they can make it work. This is why Christian libertarianism is the only kind that works. And even then, it's like you still have to be more Christian than libertarian, because libertarianism assumes some things about the world which are not consistent with Christianity, but you can dismiss those pretty easily and still carry quite a lot of libertarianism with you.
And even if we talk about liberalism and, or not liberalism, but let's just say like some of the better liberal principles, because I think there's a tendency to dogpile on, I think there's a build to the point to where Christianity built civilization, right? Like liberalism would carry some of that through, which is to say this. I heard recently, I think it was Tim Cass, maybe it was some other like more like mainstream place, but it was that, it's like, what was Adam? The whole business of the Constitution was meant for a moral society. Without a society that values morals as a cultural artifact, or maybe this was Pete's stream. I don't remember. It was a good thought. Whatever it was. The point being, like even like the framers of the Constitution weren't people who thought, well, an immoral culture can take this and like have a good functioning, healthy society. They thought like, so this is to the point of how over time, over generations, how an idea can become degraded as well. And so like, where we're in the narrow focus of libertarianism, there's a broader focus to be had, I think, within, I would argue within the broader American polity, let's say.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure we've made that point before as well, that, this thing really doesn't work. This libertarianism thing, it doesn't work unless you have unless it's like grounded in Christianity. And actually, this whole civilization thing doesn't work. But that's our other podcast. But we get into that on They Have Uncrowned Him, and that series is a 3-part series. We have 3 episodes out right now, and you should all definitely check that out.
Yeah.
So let's move on to the next page.
Yeah. So the next section is why it happened. So one does not need. It's funny how I don't even know. Like I said, it's kind of in a flux on this part of like where I find myself personally standing. But whatever. I think for better or worse, I'll always be part of the libertarian label. Will always be like a part of my political makeup, just because it's an easy identifier. So one does not need to reject libertarianism in order to see that there has been a dulling of rhetoric. This is where I get a little nasty, I'll be honest. Yeah. There are libertarians who would defend government lockdowns and vaccine mandates. There are libertarians who would defend the rioting of 2020. There are even libertarians who call themselves socialist. Many of these so-called libertarians operate within the Libertarian Party. The LPMC's takeover is an attempt to change this. The goal is then to bring a principled libertarian message to Americans, to wake them up to the message of liberty. The post-libertarian moment is recognizing how many Americans are already awake and never truly cared. Turns out, most people will do as they're told. And turns out, people in power have some really dark ambitions. This is to say, modern methods of propaganda allow for a greater degree of social control than what a libertarian may heretofore have believed. The Praxians have arisen out of the post-libertarian moment, united by the mission of how to combat this new form of tyranny where your body may be free, but your mind is enslaved.
And I really like, what you said right here, that the post-libertarian moment is recognizing exactly how many Americans are already awake. And it's like, they don't care. Liberty, like again, why am I called Popular Liberty? It's an ironic name, because liberty is not popular at all. It's like, it's not that people haven't really heard the libertarian argument. They've heard it. They don't care. It's like that like a lot of times, because usually when you get like one or two questions in is about where it happens, where they start asking, well, hey, what about roads and bridges? What about teachers and cops and stuff like this? And this is where you start losing people with libertarianism, because what you're and you're not losing them because they don't like the idea of liberty per se. The reason that you're losing them, when they start asking you these questions about how this thing would work, this one service or this function of government would work without a government, because the whole function of government isn't like those particular services. The function of government is actually to be a monopoly on violence. This thing is a monopoly on aggression. And that's where you should realize aggression isn't like the problem. Aggression is like the service they're providing. Like, this is not a problem for the people. They like it. This is like the service that they're paying for, and they're paying for it to be used against you. And so when you're saying that hey, we're going to run on no more like easy aggression, no more easy fixes with violence and force, and I say that as a guy who's read Rothbard, read Hoppe. I know these things don't work. It's like, I'm not arguing that they do, and they definitely do not work. But that's not the thing. That it's like the service that the state is actually selling to the people is an aggressively imposed order, and they like it. They're willing to pay for it. So when you're going in selling liberty, saying that you're going to take that away from them, this is not going to sell. This is exactly why. It's not because that it's not that they don't like aggression and are trying to get away from it. It's that they do like it and they want more of it. I mean, what happened in 2020? Okay, there's a crisis coming along. What do the people want? A lot more government. It's like they didn't demand liberty. It's like only after it got taken away. And some of the lockdowns were just like incredibly, they were incredibly totalitarian. They were, but I mean, it was only in like some of those worst places where you had real pushback.
Let's talk about this in terms of specialization for a second, though. All right, let's talk about this in terms of specialization. Like, in particular, right? You and I are people who, and most of the people listening to this, I would argue, are like probably spend an inordinate amount of time examining the news cycle, analyzing current events, researching topics like economics and political philosophy and biology and physics and chemistry. Like, that's a very small subset of the population. And in fact, if you understand like bell curves and everything, there's only so many people that are actually capable of grasping the thought in its totality. So I've said a lot recently on my show is like, it's not about, and like, this is where like we're kind of trained backwards, especially with the university system, is it's actually, it's not about having an academic debate. Those have a use, but its use is more for like building culture and leisure purposes and exploration. What's more important is when you can take something complex and make it simple, i.e., and the easiest example of this is the device you carry with you every single day. The smartphone is a very complex piece of machinery that's designed to have somebody who doesn't know how it works operate it. Like I was just watching the Marjorie Taylor Greene testimony today, and the judge at one point said, "You don't want me to touch a computer, right? It's the little box with a screen that I just kind of look at, right? But I'm sure that judge can read his emails. I'm sure he's typed on his computer before. So the question isn't, can we construct a complicated understanding of the world vis-a-vis Rothbard? The conversation is, how can we give that to the mass of people who don't care enough who don't have, because they have more pressing concerns, right? This isn't like, this isn't an admonishment. This is a matter of specialization. This is a matter of leadership. This is a matter of how do you perceive your role, right? Mm-hmm. with the broader community that you're a part of. And that's where I would argue the radical individualism that kind of manifests itself, we might say, in a college milieu, and like reinforced by a progressive society, becomes like a negative feedback effect, because you don't care about the community, you don't care about the broader people, because it's just about what I want. And again, well, it's like, okay, we're having a political conversation here. As soon as you've entered a political conversation, you've kind of given up that you've kind of given up the argument on whether or not you're trying to make statements for a broader society or a broader people, I would argue.
You got to go back to that they don't care. Like, you can make all of it. This is why, I'm so against the I'm not like against the idea of spreading the message and waking people up. I just recognize this is not going to work because people, one, don't care, and two, are for the most part are already awake, and it's like, and they're not buying what you're selling. It's like you don't have customers that you think you do. This is not like a population that once they hear Rothbard for the first time, they're going to be like, oh, wow, I never thought of that. You don't hurt people and take their stuff. I can't believe I never thought of that.
Well, and I'll be honest, I never really had this perception. I enjoyed the Thanksgiving conversations about, drug legalization. I kind of enjoyed that as like a fun intellectual conversation that I had with my family members or friends, or I would say, hey, here are the insights that I find from it. But you know what I mean? Like, but it was never, for me, it was never about conversion.
Yeah. It never goes beyond that. It's like, that's why most people, most libertarians want to be libertarians, is that it's kind of a contrarian idea that most people have not quite considered. Is like they understand it, instinctively, but instinctively they also reject it, for all of the same reasons. And that's why it never goes beyond it. And it's not going anywhere. People already feel like they're free, within the exception of 2020, 2022. And now they kind of want some freedom back, and they might be a little bit more willing than normal to go for a libertarian.
And instead of, this is, well, no, but I'll use a rhetorical flourish here, because I've been thinking a lot about rhetoric and philosophy and the differences between that. But I'll use a rhetorical flourish here. Instead of having the conversation about how we can make the country better, we want to have conversations. And this just was a recent Twitter exchange I had about why New Hampshire is better than Florida. It's why are you trying to make New Hampshire a thing? I for the people who live there, I wish you all the best. I have zero desire to live in the Northeast. If I was going to live in the Northeast of the United States, it probably wouldn't be there. And Florida has sunshine year round, and triple, and 30 times the population. Oh yeah. So let's not. It's this weird. It's funny because they buy into the egalitarian delusion when it suits them, because it's I'm supposed to compare these things as apples to apples. And my point isn't to disparage the advancements of New Hampshire. My point is the pure libertarianism, right? This religious libertarianism, this evangelical libertarianism is insisting that the rhetoric must be, well, no, New Hampshire passed more bills. New Hampshire passed more bills than Florida did. And even though they all haven't been signed by the governor, but New Hampshire passed more bills that were better, including something about, I'm sorry, this is just a specific thing that happened, of guns on snowmobiles, and then somebody gave me a lecture about how Florida banned open carry to discriminate against the Cubans. And it's oh, that's the first time I'm ever hearing this as a Cuban American. It's maybe the Marielitos, but those were criminals that Fidel put on a boat when he said, okay, all the people who want to go to America, you can. And then so you had people who were trying to escape communism. And then Fidel just opened up all the criminals, all the prisons, and he put all the prisoners on the boat and said, here, America, this is your problem. So maybe that could get construed into some left-wing political talking points about how you're discriminated against Cubans. But the reality is I'm pretty sure there were Cubans who voted for that bill because it was 1987. Ronald Reagan was president, and we were passing assault weapons bans at the federal level. The Second Amendment, the whole Second Amendment conversation was different at that point. So it's
very different point in time, very different party. You want to say that this is this is not the party of Ronald Reagan. This is not the party of George W. Bush. Yeah. Again, you go back just one page to this is people who haven't updated their ideas since 2008.
Yeah, as I say, they're living in a moment.
Yeah, they're living in the libertarian moment, which was the first part that we saw. So let's move on to what it is not.
Yes,
because this is actually pretty critical and short, but really needs to be said.
Right, and I felt it's necessary because it's often the first, it's often one of the first follies, kind of sent out whenever anybody airs off of, well, I guess what I would call today a liberal path. The post-libertarian moment is not about race essentialism. Reacting to the race essentialism of progressives only serves the regime. The alt-right were stooges who chose to follow the red herring of racism along with most of left-wing America and all of popular culture. Racism in America is the oldest and most persistent method of social control. The Praxian recognizes how elites exert social control and design against it. The post-libertarian moment is not about embracing statism. The statism paradigm popularized within libertarianism is outdated in a world where Facebook controls what you are allowed to see more than the US government.
Mhm.
Corporate responsibility is just as useful an avenue of implementing a radical progressive agenda as the FBI or Department of Education is in 2021. The Praxian accounts for this.
And the libertarian really does not. And this is like a point I was making not earlier. Actually, I think it was earlier today. It might have been yesterday. But where I draw the line with a private company is: are you aiding the government or not? It's like, if you're aiding the state, why should I see? If you're taking these actions on behalf of the state, why should I respect you as private property? It's like, they're not censoring. Like, understand, like Twitter and Facebook and all these and YouTube, they're not censoring us because they feel some corporate responsibility. They're doing it because they got dragged. Their CEOs got dragged in front of the Congress, and they got given. They got basically a good old fashioned shakedown behind closed doors. They say, hey, if you don't start censoring for us, we're going to start regulating you. And this is where that comes from. It's like, they're doing this on behalf of the government so they can avoid regulation. And I'm sorry, I don't respect that. It's like, if they actually stood their principles and said, no, make me. And then they were made to, I'd be like, okay, I respect that a little more. And I could at least say, okay, well, it's not their fault. They are legitimately being forced into this. And at least then we could have a constitutional battle about it. And we could, in the courts. But we can't even do that because, frankly, they kind of want to censor. And now they've just been looking for the excuse. Now they have it. And because they're a bunch of progressives. And So if you're going around saying, hey, this is the private company, if they want to, help out the state, that's fine. If Amazon, if they want to be the ones to load us on private boxcars all the way to the private concentration camp, that's fine. It's a private company. It's like, this is like, you're basically, they're arguing for like a free ride on a boxcar to the hill they're going to die on.
Well, and this is the point that I make. I make this point in the last section, I think, where I say, hang on, no, it's in the first part. It's without application, there is no point in theorizing what a perfect libertarian world would look like, nor is it useful to use that perfect libertarian world as a baseline for determining right and wrong. So your causality is backwards in effect when you if you apply the a public-private distinction that no longer exists, right? And in fact probably really hasn't existed, and that's just like a formal state analysis, we might say. If we go one level deeper and we go to a more informal power analysis where we try to map the way animating ideas are being acted out throughout society on a broad scale, right? The cult of woke, right? The intersectionality, the diversity, equity, and inclusion, the queer theory, the way that these ideas manifest throughout power centers and the way they've been able to take over power centers, you really start to see how an insistence upon public-private distinctions again, this is about, I put this in the frame of recalibration. You're not actually fighting tyranny. You're not, fuck authoritarianism. You're not fighting tyranny if you're still focused on the public-private distinction. In fact,
that's only one mode of tyranny.
Yeah,
that's only one avenue. And yes, it is still a very, very important paradigm, but you can't use it as the only one anymore because the elites have figured out ways around that now.
Yep.
And there's, and again, this is another point I make about how a Praxian recognizes how elites exert control. these are not one-trick ponies. Like, they're elites for good reason. Yeah, and they're not nearly as dumb as we like to pretend that they are. They are unimpressive. I will give you that. They are unimpressive because they're truly transparent about it, and they're bad at this. But they have multiple avenues. They have the banks. They have the basically all corporations. They have all kinds of government money, all kinds of welfare, all kinds of influence campaigns. They have all kinds of different things where they have both, and even when it comes to like spying, they just get other governments to do it for them. Like you ever heard of the Five Eyes of like the intelligence agencies? Well, it's like, okay, the CIA is not allowed to spy on Americans. So what do? They go get the Brits and MI6 to do it for them, and then send them the information. Oh, hey, I think you've got a bad guy over here you might need to check on. Wink. And then we turn around and spy on them for them. And so when it comes out, they're like, oh my God, America's spying on our allies. So like, they know. It's like they're letting us do it. It's like they fully aware that we're spying on them. They want us to do it because we're sending them the information on their own citizens, because they're not allowed to spy on their own citizens. So they get their allies to do it for them. And they just subvert the Constitution this way. It's like to say that this is like a public-private distinction, or it's even a my government or somebody else's government distinction. These paradigms don't work at all.
And let's focus on one more, which is just racism is the oldest and most persistent method of social control. That is, it doesn't matter what direction you point the quote unquote racism, right? The discrimination based off of, let's say, phenotypic manifestations of phenotypic differences in Homo sapiens, right? Like that, like it's not actually about hating another group. It's about the power that you get from having a group of people hate another group of people. And as the elite, what the elite can do with that power. So for most of American history, that racism was focused on the black community, right? The slaves who were, the freed slaves and Jim Crow and all the nasty progressive eugenics that like basically we've inherited. And inherited, I mean people who were born in the United States when we were born in the United States, right? We have no choice but to have that be a part of our history. But to the point is the alt-right of 2016, which did exist, right? The alt-right, they fell for the ploy, right?
It's like this was something I always remember Rush Limbaugh always used to talk about. And the demand for racism and racists is quite a lot higher than the supply. And here these idiots come. You're like, oh, I'll be the supply. Hi, I'm a racist. Look at me. I'm a Nazi. And it's like, what happened to them? They got nuked.
Well, you have
everyone hates racists.
You have probably a bunch of average to below average people in IQ speaking who are
below average.
who in their defense have been told that they are the ill of society their entire life, right? And they don't have the answers to try and respond against it, and their very being is under attack. And so they say, well, screw you. I just read this study, and this study shows that there are differences across races in terms of IQ. It's like, okay, Thomas Sowell kind of does away with that. And frankly, and even the bell curve itself isn't making the case that like the alt-right and the race essentialists think it's making, because the bell curve is in itself a response to the conception that where there is a disparity in outcome, racism must be the culprit from a social policy standpoint. And that has been the social policy de jure of government for, again, let's say the New Society, so 50, 60 years, is to say where there is a disparity in outcome, it must be due to racism, right? And so understanding that like behavior and behavior and your behavioral temperament and your general intelligence is actually a better predictor for that completely turns that narrative upon its head. And so it would actually enable a far more cohesive social policy if people would adopt that, but they don't for reasons that we could get into. But to the point is, because racism offers a method of social control. This is why Nancy Pelosi put the stole on with the African theme and knelt in the halls of Congress to literally establish the new progressive civic religion. Like that like quite literally was done but also has, again, that deeper metaphysical consequence.
Yeah. It's like when you understand that everything they're doing is about control. If they're talking about it, it's because they want to control it. If they're talking about Ukraine, it's because they want to control Ukraine. If they're talking about Russia, it's because they want to control Russia.
Even Elon Musk, right? Like, like like Elon Musk wants to control people. I think he might do a slightly better job than some other people. So like, I'm kind of cool with it so far. Maybe I'll turn on him. I'll turn on him when it's necessary to, right? But it's like, I'm the naivete.
And then there's the benefit of, hey, there's one, with him is one king, one guy in charge, and we all know who it is. When something goes wrong, it's his fault. And we all know who to blame. That's the benefit of monarchies. When something goes wrong, there's accountability. We know who to blame.
Well, look at the opposite, which is when these companies became publicly traded, and everybody looked to the king, aka Jack Dorsey, but the king had no power, right? In that actual thing, his power had been taken away from him by the advisors, right?
Well, by the state, really. It's like the state was the one who dragged him in, and he really was a free speech guy. But he did a legitimately good job of it up until like 2017 when he got hauled in front of Congress and was given the shakedown. And at that point, he's like, all right, I know what I'm going to do now. They're actually are threatening me. So yeah, this is, and when Alex Jones got banned, everyone except Twitter banned him on the same exact day, and Twitter waited like a week and a half to ban him.
That's a good point.
They were facing withering criticism that entire time because Jack Dorsey didn't want to do it, and that was the whole reason. It's like the woke progressives absolutely wanted to ban Alex Jones. Jack Dorsey did not. But hey, this is the state, and they have all kinds of ways of getting around this public-private distinction. They have all kinds of ways of using race, sexual, and all kinds of different identity politics.
Well, and again, for the people who pay attention, that the people who are working in the Obama administration then went to go work for Facebook, right? Like those were the people who established the Facebook government groups that fed millions of dollars potentially illegally to different municipalities across the country, right? So it's like. And same thing with the press outlets. Jen Psaki is going to be on Jen Psaki is probably going to have a primetime spot on MSNBC if she doesn't stay with the Biden administration.
Oh, she could go to CNN Plus.
Oh, never mind.
Up too soon. I will buy it for CNN Plus for $43. Final offer, best and final.
I mean, shit, man. Somebody already developed an app. You may as well buy it. But it's but to the point is again this is the informal power, right? There's the formal analysis of going before Congress and then whatever happened behind the scenes, and then there's also just the general shuffling of people as they move between different jobs and the ideas that they embody and imbue and then manifest and act out in their everyday life. And so you can follow those trends as well to see again how the social control is exerted across the population.
What does it mean?
Though many would choose to, it is not wise to live in a moment. It doesn't matter whether that moment is with Ayn Rand in 1960, Ron Paul in 2008, or some future place where all your dreams come true. Some will face the post-libertarian moment, reject it, and remain unchanged. The Praxian, by contrast, embraces the moment, consumes its significance, and begins to ask new questions as a result. The Libertarian.
I want to stop right there.
Go for it. Yeah, there's a lot of meat in these next couple of sections.
Let's stop right there because though many would choose to, it is not wise to live in a moment. Why? Because it necessarily means you're living in the past. Like we said. The people who are most against us are the ones who made this thing their religion, and they are living in 2008. And I mean, I can think of several prominent names off the top of my head who just hate my guts. And these are the people I like. Scott Horton, dude does not like me, and it's a mutual feeling. He's a lefty, and he really doesn't like Matt Erickson, because the reason why is he's stuck in 2006. He still thinks it's 2006 and the Republicans are still 3 years into the Iraq War. That's the world he still lives in. And, and when it comes time to adapt to there's a new thing here with Ukraine or in China, it's he's not prepared. He doesn't understand it, and he doesn't have nearly the mind, the memory to actually go through all this. He doesn't have all that fact base. He doesn't understand all this stuff. So and he's really not good on when it comes to like your basics of libertarianism. And he's really a one-trick pony. And so he's going to be like ultra insecure when it comes to like Matt Erickson coming on to like Pete's show and just drilling hole after hole after hole in the foundation of libertarianism. And this is where this guy will come on and start just like, oh God, I can't stand these post-libertarian bastards or whatever. Or he'll come on to like my Twitter feed or whatever and be like, would you at least give them a trial? And like, which was like not at all what I was talking about. and so and I'm just gonna like brush this guy off. It doesn't matter what I say to him; he's gonna hate me no matter what. So fuck him. And guys like him who will never move forward. It's like he can never move past that. Like imagine like trying to convince him that he needs to become a Republican. And because the party of Trump is a very new party that really doesn't like war and would really like to hear his anti-war message and would be very receptive to it. And he would never do it. He could never do that. Like if you nominate him to speak at the convention, he could probably stomach it for an hour or two.
Well, I was going to say, I think if you pay, I don't know. I think maybe I'm just more wishful thinking.
Go ahead. That's wishful thinking. You wanted him to change his party registration? Forget it. It's like,
no. But like if instead of, well, yeah, if instead of the architecting of the LPMC, if it wasn't about going and
that's
taking
also
over
his baby, by the way.
Yeah, right. That's
he's the one who came up with that idea. Like he was the one who recruited everybody for that.
Right. Yeah. Well. Yeah, and so I think that's the other problem. Is like we're literally just disagreeing with his grand strategy, and I have a lot of respect for Scott for what he's done for the personally, like for the terror wars and like his his encyclopedic knowledge. That does not a strategist make. It's a different. It's again. Let's go back to a word I used before: specialization. So this is I don't know. I think again it's a at the end of the day, if you're going to pick up the game, this is it's funny because Matt and I had an exchange before we ever talked behind the scenes or not even behind the scenes, before we ever were on a podcast together or like had a private correspondence. It was something of like, politics is war by other means, and that's why the libertarian isn't going to make it. And I'm like, well, what if as talking as myself is like, well, what if you recognize that it is? It's like, well, you better be willing to do what it takes. And it's like, well, yeah, it turns out it's actually, it is a matter of stomaching it. And again, to the point of allies and building coalitions and like, how do you ask? It is a matter of swallowing your pride, right? And saying, you know what? Specifically to the point, because one thing I do disagree with Scott on,
to sacrifice for the greater good. Yes, or
right.
No?
Well, but one thing I do disagree with him profusely on is this whole like weird thing where he seems stuck in the George W. Bush Republican Party and blaming the people of the Republican Party.
Yeah.
It is the propagandized people, right? And it's and I can understand. And it's difficult when you take this path that we've taken, right? And that he's taken too, of exploration and like researching things in detail. And then you look at everybody else and you're like, how do you not see this?
But again, people should have had this post-libertarian moment a long time ago.
Yeah. But again,
the reason he hates the people is he spends so much time trying to convince these people. And he convinced quite a lot of them. And there's a lot more that just like straight up rejected him. Why? Because you look like Team Enemy. You look like some hippie, and you kind of sound like one too, and you're not a Republican, and you kind of hate Republicans. So how are they going to see you? How are they supposed to see you? Like they're going to look at you like you're a leftist because you kind of are, and and you're in part of this Libertarian Party, which really is the leftist party. And so maybe that's a recent development, but before then you're not wearing their team. You're communicating to them, I'm not on your team. and therefore you should listen to me. It's like, no, that's exactly wrong. It's literally the opposite. What you should have done first was convince them that you are on their team and that you're the one trying to protect them. It's like if you were wearing that Republican logo, saying the exact same things, you would have been so much more effective. And because you're signaling to them that you're the in group, not the out group. By starting from the out group, starting from the Libertarian Party, or starting from just an independent, you're signaling that you're not on their team and that you're not here to defend them. You're here to like win an argument with them. They're not gonna like that. As it's a fundamentally different perception of how to deal with people that like a Praxian will employ. Because they understand a lot more of these nuances of like red team and blue team are real things, and people the elites, in order to control people, they use in-group and out-group signaling. Racism, like we were just talking about, was one of them. That is a way of signaling out groups. And when they call you a racist, it has nothing to do with whether you are an actual racist or not. It is just simply signaling that's an out group, that's an enemy, that's the enemy.
Precisely.
And that's all it's about. So when you are like a libertarian wearing a libertarian logo, you are signaling I am team enemy. And you want to appeal to Republicans or Democrats, forget it. It's like you're the enemy.
Big L. I think we would agree. Yeah. The big L is key here because it wasn't that long ago that libertarians were at least a portion of the Republican Party, and I think we could be again. Or at least the Praxians. People
were very receptive to both Ron Paul and Donald Trump with their anti-war messages. Mm-hmm. There were some people who still disagreed with it.
Well, dude, and if JD Vance's campaign is like Donald Trump Jr., they are hitting that hard. Sending the sons to die, man. It's like that's one of those things. Is like, why don't you see it? And so here's let's in answering that question, that's where I came up with this. In trying to because okay, so for example, Dave Smith, love him. What his thing to do with racism is always to say, well, I don't know what that means, right? Okay, well, I'm a sense maker. I'm making sense of how people use the term racism, and the way people use the term racism, as you're saying, is signaling an outgroup that person is an enemy, but moreover, it's a method of social control.
Yeah, and when you don't, try to use the same exact techniques, when you refuse to call them groomers, or call them pedophiles, it's like the point of this isn't that they actually like diddling kids. Many of them actually do want to diddle kids. Okay, so let's leave that there. A lot of them actually are pedophiles and actually are groomers. But the point of it is merely to use this word as a cudgel against them.
Yes. Let's not get too far down this rabbit hole. But I think there's a secondary aspect of it in terms of genetic death. That is more in the grooming than the actual diddling. Yeah. If you will.
We won't go down that rabbit hole just yet, but that is another really good point. But if you're like, if you are, kind of just, you're seeing these things and you're trying to just dispel it altogether, that's not what you're supposed to do. You don't you take a weapon and then just drop it. You take a weapon and use it. Or like you take their weapon from them and use it against them.
Well, and as our friend Pete has said, how often has the term free press been used as a weapon against good-minded Americans?
All
right,
the
free press, free speech. Oh, and that's why we're supposed to pretend a communist's voice has equal weight in society, right? It doesn't. It shouldn't. They believe in bad ideas,
and
right?
Monstrous ideas.
You can pat them on the head and shove them along, but now they're in positions of power, and we have a problem. And to the point, let's move on to the second paragraph. Yeah. Ready? The libertarian prescription to the post-war order is out of date. Yes. What might have helped the so-called liberal democracies of the late 20th century will not work as we enter a new decade. A narrow libertarianism, a corporate libertarianism, if you will, focuses on the state and justifies corporate tyranny. A narrow libertarianism focuses on opposition to the duopoly while ignoring the incentive of power. A narrow libertarianism defends an unrealized ideal online, but scoffs at the idea of taking steps to make so much money. Taxation is a nuisance. Let's take each of those sentences in turn.
Okay, yeah.
So Yeah. So what might have helped the liberal democracies of the late 20th century will not work. So the narrow libertarianism focuses on the state and justifies corporate tyranny. I think we've covered that. So I think we've covered that well enough before we got to this point. A narrow libertarianism focuses on opposition to the duopoly while ignoring the incentive of power. This is very much a hat tip to your conception of archotropism, and really just recognizing the thing that the left has seen our entire life, which is that there is an incentive to power, and so you may as well capitalize on it.
Yeah, this thing exists. And to lead into the next with archotropism, to lead into the next question, justifying corporate tyranny. It's like, you have to understand the state and the corporations are in a symbiotic relationship. Like these two are, it's not like private and public. It's like these are the same team. It's tyrants versus people, and the tyrants are on the same team. And so if you're saying, oh, like end the corporate welfare or whatever, it's like you're saying end like socialism to all of their cronies who helped them get elected. As like saying, oh, this is something we should all agree on. And it's like, I'm just like, no, that is not at all what they're going. They will not agree with you on that, because it's like this. The whole point of this is as a slush fund, and that you don't see this as for the industrial complex it is, even though they know that this is an industrial complex. It's designed to get politicians reelected. So it's like, why do you think politicians are ever going to vote against something that helps them get elected kind of for cheap? And it's like they get to take money from you, give it to corporations who launder it back into their campaign funds. This is the easiest thing that they've ever invented. They're never giving this thing up, and that you want to run on it. That you want to run against it, signals that one, the corporations are going to hate you. They're going to do whatever it takes to make sure you don't get elected and you don't get any power. You don't get anywhere near power. And for the politicians, even if you get in, Mitch McConnell and like Nancy Pelosi, these guys are going to laugh at you. They're like, we're never ending this. That's not the point. You can run on that against that all day long. We will find somebody to shut you up, and or get you unelected somehow. And like so you can't you can't use a narrow paradigm like this anymore. It does not work, because they've adapted. You have it. Again, stuck in 2008.
Well, it is also, let's take this another. There was 2 points I wanted to make. One is, again, Thomas Sowell in Discriminations and Disparities, one of his most recent books, does a great job of talking about what I might term it commonly as like network effects. I.e., did you know that most astronauts are firstborn or only childs? And and if you're maybe some people know that. The reason for that is actually because the firstborn tends to have the highest general intelligence of a group of siblings. So it can differ, but that is a general trend. And so therefore, most astronauts, which is like a highly selected group of people for whatever else you want to say about government funding and it's like this is a highly selected group of people, and they all happen to have this thing, and nobody was ever planning for this, right? And I talked before about how people go between Facebook and CNN and the administration and the White House and these people run in the same circles. There are network effects. Like when I people know that I travel a decent bit for work. It's very common that I run into somebody in my industry on a bus, on a plane, in a hotel bar, randomly. Why? And it might seem random, but no, it's a network effect because of the nature of my industry. I'm going to find people in certain towns where there's a cluster of similar kinds of businesses, because that tends to be the way a lot of businesses end up operating, just for, supply chains and things like that. So these phenomena are explainable. That's part of the incentive of power is, what are you talking? I don't care about what the plebs so much of the media cycle is what I call the cult of American democracy. It's a game that they want people to play.
Yeah.
And so that they keep, again, the libertarian point, fighting against each other and not looking up, right?
Yeah.
That you diagnose that correctly. The diagnosis is good. The prescription is bad, and I would argue it's out of date.
It's not just even right there with ignoring the incentives of power. It's like libertarians should be the first people to tell you everything you want to know about how incentives work. I mean, you guys have mastered Austrian economics. My God. It's like you have all of the tools you need in order to figure this problem out. But what do you do with it? You just say, oh, power incentive bad. That's all I need to know about it. And then, no. You actually need to know quite a lot more about it, because if you did know a little bit more about it, particularly if you knew a little more about about how humans work, and we've talked about this earlier, that most humans are not ideological thinkers. So they don't think in an ideological way to begin with. Thus, in order for an LPMC strategy to work, we talked about this last time. For an LPMC strategy to work, for spreading the message and getting people and converting people to libertarianism, you would first have to convert them to an ideological way of thinking when they are currently incentive-based thinkers. This is not possible. This has never been done. It is not doable. And so these are people who do not think ideologically to begin with. And so in order to even begin to convert them to libertarianism, you would have to convert the entire way they view the world first. And you just can't do it. But on the other hand, the politicians, they understand that people are not ideological thinkers at all. And they've known that for since the 1940s, almost a good 80 years. That since real polling came out, that in the kind of mid 40s, they've known that people are not ideological at all, and they do not bother it. Yeah, they do not bother running on real ideology. They just here's a nice commercial about me with the American flag and some rows of wheat and corn behind me, and I'm wearing a flannel shirt, and some jeans or something like that. And oh, what a nice guy! Vote for me. Yeah. It's like they understand that most people, they only vote for the person. Name. What the number one and number two biggest indicators of a winning candidate are?
Height, and I know height is one. Height is the main one, right?
No. It's on the top. It's like in top 5, but the
eye color.
Nope. The number one is name recognition by far.
Oh, okay. Name
recognition by far, and because people don't know anybody else, it's just strangers' names on the ballot. Why do I care? And
I think in that they've measured it after the fact that taller people tend to win elections as well. I think that's what I was going to. But name recognition is 100%.
And the second one after name recognition is the letter of your name. What does it begin with? If the closer it is to A, the more likely you're going to win. The reason why is because they'll just check the first box and they're sorted alphabetically.
Yeah,
that's exactly why. And it's if people don't know and they don't care, they're just going to check the box. That's the first one, and they're not going to look it up. And so that's number one and number two. These are the sort of people you want to preach libertarianism to. Forget it. It's just they completely forget it. This is not how they think at all. Not even close. And you could not possibly begin to convert these people to an ideological way of thinking when they don't vote that way. They vote based on incentives. And so just give them better incentives. The way Apraxian adapts to this situation is we just say, well, all right, we need to understand the incentive structure and then just behave accordingly. That's it.
Yeah. Right now, right now, the people who are operating in Libertarian Party politics, because that's that's what we're criticizing.
They're finding out about incentives, by the way.
No. You know what they're doing right now? They're spending tens of thousands of dollars to collect signatures to get somebody on a ballot.
I know. That's the incentives of the Libertarian Party.
Of people who will invariably lose.
Yeah, and it's these are the incentives of the party. It's and by the way, when they started off, they were saying, "No, we're not going to do that because that's just a waste of time and it just frustrates people and it just associates our name with losing." Yeah. And what are they doing now? The same exact thing. Why? Because that's the incentive of the party. They want to get the party's name out there. Now that they're in control of it, they really want to get its name out there any way that they can and get the message out there any way they can, even if these ways are completely ineffective and counterproductive. Because again, they don't understand incentives.
Let's hit this last sentence before we close it out. A narrow libertarianism defends an unrealized ideal online, but scoffs at the idea of taking steps to make so much money. Taxation is a nuisance. This is a particular dig at this is a particular dig at the people who didn't like the whole "don't be poor" message. And again, this is like a huge cognitive dissonance, which is what I argued in the piece that I wrote about this. It's a huge cognitive dissonance. It's like, it doesn't mean that taxation isn't a form of extortion. It doesn't mean that taxation isn't theft, but me saying taxation is theft didn't make my debt burden any less, didn't make my tax burden this year any less, right? And when faced with that reality, you're stuck with a couple of choices. You can pay, you can not pay, or you can then, like I said, you can this is the prescription, right? So I hate taxes. So I want to make sure that I make enough money that taxes aren't destroying me every single year like they did for a long time, just and like trying to live barely on the edge, right? Whatever. But then also to the second point of getting to that level where I can have that guy that makes sure I get every tax break that I can, right? The way Bernie Sanders does, I'm sure. You understand? So it's again, that's the prescriptive thing, right? The diagnosis is fine. The prescription is what's at fault. The prescription of people who sit and say it doesn't matter. How dare you want to make more money and support this system? It's like, yeah, I want to make more money because then I'll be in a position to help myself and help people in my life. And that's a pretty nice thing. And I don't really care about what you think about the system, like in a certain respect, because I have bills to pay and most people have bills to pay. By the way, on that whole incentive of power thing, I don't need to psychoanalyze anybody else but myself. But the rejection of power is directly relatable to a rejection of taking on responsibility for yourself and responsibility for your people around, for people around you. And I say and I've tied that very much with myself. The more I've taken on, the better I've become as a person. Right. And it's always the worry of not being able to rise up to the challenge that makes you turn away opportunities for power.
Well, it's also, it's just like you always say, like, not you, but like these, what they'll say is like, this is not my problem. I should not be the one that has to change. It's like, it should be the other guy that has to change. I'm not the problem. It's like, I'm just doing my life and here they come in getting in my way. And it's like, well, cool, but what are you going to do about it? It's like nothing. You're just kind of going to kind of complain about it, and so you're kind of useless, and you're not even going to give anybody money, to try to do it for you. So you're not even looking for specialization. You're just looking for attention.
But just in terms of personal growth, you said something really and mindset. You said something really important there, where you're like that people get stuck in the thing is it's other people's fault that they're and this is what we see manifested in the left with the queer ideology, right? It's not my problem. I don't have a problem. Society has a problem with me.
This is liberalism in a nutshell, by the way.
And let me speak as somebody who's kind of on the weirder side, like I think a lot of us listening are. It's like, no, I'm the problem, right? Like, and not that I'm a bad person, but that I need to make sure that I adapt to social situations, and that I understand, I recognize social taboos and like understand like the proper context and the proper time. I discovered this a lot in the business world, coming like out of academia, right? Where it's like, I love long-winded conversations, and in fact, I got jibed today for writing a longer email. Like, oh, do you get paid by the word? Because I was a little upset at a vendor or at a supplier of mine. But to the point of like, these like, no, let's get things done. Don't worry about the flourishing conversation. And you know what? Sometimes you got to shut up when you're the young person in the room, and you got to listen to people with more experience and And if I could say, no, they're the problem. It's their fault that that they don't understand that I have the best ideas. Or I say, no, it's my fault. I need to message my ideas better, because if they're the right ones, and in some cases in the business world, I was making the right ones, I just have to get better at marketing it, at messaging it. It's again, this is a very easy mindset thing that the more you buy into that you're the problem in a situation, the easier you'll find, the less problems you'll find that you have.
By the way, I'm not like being a hypocrite here. It's like, I'm putting my own money, I'm putting my own time into Mises GOP. It's like, I'm raising money to help run people for office and get libertarians elected. And by the MisesGOP.org/donate if you're feeling inclined to help out. It was like, I'm putting my money where my mouth is. I really believe what I say and I practice what I preach. That, that you need to actually be getting involved in like real tangible ways. And you need to be actually, at least at a bare minimum, contribute money, if not time and attention. And because in order to get some people, I understand not everyone can run for even local office. I get that. It's really easy to do so. The fact I don't live in a place where I can run for office, is the only thing stopping me from doing that myself. It's like if I lived in a area where I could run for any sort of local office, I would do so. I don't, and so what I'm doing instead is I'm raising money for the people who can. And it's like I really do believe these things that I say, and I am practicing what I'm preaching. And I think other people should do the same. Because I'm not content to just sit and complain and bitch about it. Because if we just sit around and bitch about it, then 2020 is going to happen all over again in 2030, probably.
And it'll be worse.
Yeah.
The idea of freedom or liberty is much older than the libertarian label or the United States of America. The hubris of every age is thinking there is no more growth possible. Libertarians would do well to not fall victim to the same malady.
This is intrinsic to liberalism.
Yeah, and let's move on to the divide. Many will frame the current debate again. I wrote this back in November. It's kind of funny how it's we're anyway. We'll get into that. Let me just read. I always do too much preamble. Okay. Many will frame the current debate between between the Praxians and the LPMC, with the Praxians criticizing the rank and file LPMC members who want to help their community and fight for human freedom. This is a lie. The divide in the liberty movement is not between the hundreds of LPMC members and the dozen or so Praxians. The divide in the liberty movement is between those who want to take political power and those who want to make a political statement. The libertarian... Was that?
That's such a good way of putting it. The divide in the liberty movement is between those who want to take political power and those who want to make a political statement. So well put. Continue.
The libertarian who wants to make a political statement is the libertarian concerned only with attracting other libertarians. Politically speaking, this is a losing message because most people are not libertarians. Most people don't have the interest in political systems and economics that libertarians do, and therefore most people will never concern themselves with a political identity beyond a default categorization.
By the way, that default categorization is completely cultural. It's like, yes, my family is Republican, therefore I'm a Republican. My family is Democrat, therefore I vote Democrat. My neighborhood is a Democrat neighborhood, therefore I vote that way. My rural suburban neighborhood or whatever is a Republican neighborhood, therefore I vote that way. That is all the thought they give to it. And you want to come in selling them like a ground up, political view with a really obscure theory. I mean, even if it's right, even if it's a good one, it's like you have to see that people don't think this way at all for good reason. Because who's going to grow the food? If everyone's worried about arguing economics and what a libertarian world is going to be like on Twitter, who's growing the food? You know what I mean?
Well, to be fair, some of those combines have GPS positioning, so you can still tweet and do that at the same time. But
that's the idea that people are specialized. They're specialized for their thing, and other people are specialized for other things. And most people are not specialized to be like economists and political philosophers. They're just not at all, not even close. Like less than 1%. And those that are mostly not libertarians. They're elites. They're the ones running the show. They're the problem.
Yeah. Or people who didn't get it.
Understand the libertarian message the most are the ones who are like by far the most against it. They're like the targets of libertarianism. It's like,
that's a good point.
You're literally like the only possible people you could preach to are your enemies. And they're the enemy. It's like, come on. Go ahead.
For the libertarian who wants to make a political statement, this means their activist endeavors are ultimately masturbatory. Libertarians helping libertarians say libertarian things. I'm particularly proud of that sentence.
In a libertarian venue. It's like that. This is it really is Libertarian Book Club. It's like, or it's like, Yeah, it's masturbatory.
By the way,
That's
there's
such a
nothing
good
wrong
way
with
of putting it.
libertarian book clubs. I like
Oh
libertarian
yeah,
book clubs are fantastic, but they're a book,
yeah,
but it's a book club,
yeah. It's a
right?
book club.
It's not about politics. The libertarians, and this is, and just in case I'm not making this clear, I think that the leadership of the LPMC is only interested in making political statements.
Yeah, I think they've pretty much demonstrated that so far. I mean,
The
they've been around for like 5 years now, and what have they gotten done?
well,
It's like it's all just a bunch of political statements. Like we are the Ron Paul revolution, and no, you're not. You're not anything. You're like a obscure movement in a third party, that has no political power and no will to get any. And you actively like talk out against people who are advocating actually getting power, like which hi, that's Praxians, that's us. It's like we actually want to go get power and actually use it to get results. They don't. And this strategy they have is completely unoriginal. I mean, this is the same exact strategy the LP has had for 70 years now. Like I mean I can name it. Local politics, which by far is the least one that they do by far, because it gets their name out there by far the least, and actually gets the like that's again they're here to make a statement. And so what do they do? Issue coalitions. That's nothing. That's like it's like, oh, we had a meeting with a buddy and we agreed that we agree on these issues. Of course, yeah, you'd agree on drug decriminalization. Congratulations. What's that get you? Nothing. Okay. And then there's the one that they actually spend like 80% of their budget on. If you look at their 2021 budget, it was like an absurd, like way over 2/3 was spent on intra-party politics. It's like, where's the other two? Where's the issue coalitions? Where's the localism?
It's going to happen after Reno.
Oh, sure it will. Yeah, like right when they have to start fighting the LP to keep their power. It's like, I mean, you saw Starwall came out, but that actually, like, I gave it like a C+. It was a C+ plan, and he missed out on several other really good, good ways to get at them because he's not very intelligent. He's not a competent leftist. Any competent leftist would have spotted at least two, that I spotted. And I'm not saying though, but but he's got like a C+ plan. And so he's got his best part of it is he's going to greenmail them. It's what's called greenmailing, where he just sues them and he makes them spend money. He makes them waste their money that way. And because it's cheap, and it's cheap for him and expensive for them. And he's just going to bleed them dry. And so now the LP has a semi-competent strategy to resist them. They're just going to end up spending all of their money on trying to keep their power, if you can even call it that. They're going to positions more likely. That's more appropriately. They're just going to be spending all their money on keeping those positions. And what do they get for that? So no, it's like they're not going to. There is no pivot coming because they don't understand the left. They don't understand the enemy. They don't understand the elites. They don't understand these incentives.
I think more importantly is I think you made the point a number of times of invariably they're just going to adopt the incentives of the institution.
Mm-hmm.
And shout out Joshua in the chat. Which is more important, increasing liberty or being libertarian? The answer after the post-libertarian moment is increasing liberty, 100%.
Absolutely.
That's kind of how I end the essay. If you haven't read it, is I don't care about being libertarian. I care about increasing liberty. Like I care about the fact. Yeah, I care far more about that than I do the label.
Like quick this one too.
I like that. That was good too.
You have a better chance of converting a bicycle riding missionary, to libertarianism than you do of changing a liberal's mind. And libertarians are still liberals.
Yeah. I was at a dinner this week. Actually, it was breakfast, but whatever. And like my customer was talking to me to his boss about me, and we were like, the news was on because it was early and we were having breakfast in the hotel. He was like, oh yeah, like LB is he's like a super conservative. He's like, you have to go to mylittlepony.com and then you click the secret entrance and then you get onto the news websites he goes to. You know what I mean? It's like, and like, I don't care. You know what I mean? And I don't care. I care far more that this guy likes me. You know what I mean? Yeah. That this guy and this guy, this man I would consider to be a friend. Like I've had dinner at his home before. He's a really, we get along really, really well. And I care far more about the fact of that his boss sees this young guy and been like, oh, okay, cool. Like he doesn't think that like kids should be in drag and stuff like that, because we were talking about that at dinner the night before.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's like that matters far more to me than them knowing that I call myself a libertarian or called myself a libertarian. And that should be the same for you.
Yes, it should.
I would argue. Now, you know, because to the point, now, if he had said something of like, yeah, Brian's an atheist, I'd be like, I'm not really an atheist. Never really considered myself that, because that's a little more fundamental to my identity.
Yeah,
I would say that.
Exactly.
But to the point of what is more important. And so now, as we move into the next paragraph, you know, the next section is called the prescription, where I kind of lay out some solutions as I felt it was necessary to do. But it really starts with this next paragraph where I talk about the libertarian who wants to take political power. Because unlike the masturbatory libertarian who wants to just find other libertarians and talk about libertarian things, and I don't know, talk about the fact that Fauci's going down 6 fucking times a day. I'm not talking about anybody in particular who has me blocked, but I'm not interested in that. I'm just not. Like, that's a lie. I would be interested in it, but the times don't call for it. I love a good conversation about esoteric topics. I like doing it in my show. My main podcast is going to be switching to a more news focus, because I think that's what more people can engage with. And my premium content is going to start switching towards more deeper philosophical ideas. So, and that way, the people who really want it can get both, and I can kind of develop both in a different way. So, but the point being is, like, I'm all here for the fun, like, esoteric conversation, but it's also about the praxis. It's also about putting things. Yeah. It's also about taking the power, and that's what I'm trying to do with my show, is take power. Right? I'm literally trying to take over a part of your mind and hopefully help you run it a little bit better, in that you're watching me try to figure out how to work my mind better. So the libertarian who wants to take political power, by contrast to the masturbatory libertarian, understands that if you want to help the millions of politically disenfranchised Americans who are part of the awakening right, you shouldn't sound like the preachy progressive left they are escaping. The insights of libertarianism, namely the nature of the state and Austrian economics, are powerful weapons in the battle for human freedom and flourishing. The ideas are nothing without things like wealth, power, influence, community, and coalitions providing support. The libertarian who wants to take political power is a libertarian concerned with people whether or not they identify as libertarian. Mass conversion is not required to be a good member of your community and run for local office. Being the one people turn to in a crisis is worth infinitely more than being a consistent libertarian with no power.
Oh, yeah.
And one point on this, and this is part of the reason why I started BeenAwake.com, was during 2020, you know, all the people I had arguments with or conversations with over the years, my friends and acquaintances, a lot of them reached out and was kind of like, hey, dude, what do you think's going on right now? Like, I know you pay close attention to things, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's actually what kind of like springboarded me into like kind of coming back, as it were, and like taking this back on and really making a go of this writing and podcasting thing. And I didn't do that by being a good libertarian. I did that, you know, the libertarianism helped, the libertarianism, but I didn't do that by trying to convert them to libertarianism. I did that by providing at least an interesting analysis of things when we had a conversation.
Exactly. And
somebody people can turn to.
Yeah, and that's exactly the sort of idea behind this, you know, okay, stop being poor. What it really is saying is stop being powerless. Is that you want to be the guy who has knowledge as a kind of power. You want to be the guy people turn to when stuff's going wrong, and they want to help understand these things, and they want to help understand how to fix these problems. And if you're kind of just concerned about, well, just, you know, join my party, it's kind of like join my church. Yep. You know what I mean? It's like hey, my kid is being taught like. That's a bad example, because if your kid is being taught, you know, that if your boy is being taught he's a girl, church might actually be a good answer. That might be a bad example. But when you're saying you need to join my party, Imagine like going to a Catholic or an Orthodox guy and saying, you need in order to fix this societal problem, you need to join my Baptist church or my Methodist church or something like that. They're going to look at you like, are you stupid or something? It's like, join my party. Like, what? No,
yeah,
this
I'm
is
already
not
in
what
one.
people want to hear. And like you have to understand, people they have this, that they see these things in a set way, and you have to accept that you cannot change the way people think. That just doesn't happen. That's only done on the religious level. By the way, it's like the every time people like to say, oh, culture and politics are not really one's not really upstream or the other, or like politics really has an effect on culture though. And well, see, they're in a feedback loop. That's true.
Exactly.
But what really is upstream of both culture and politics is religion. Every single major paradigmatic change we've ever had in human history in terms of politics and culture has been preceded by a religious change. Every time, no exceptions. Every time it is always a religious change. Like even this, most recent war in Ukraine. What preceded it? It was the Russian Orthodox and the Ukrainian Orthodox split. Yep. Every time, no exceptions. Even if it seems to be unrelated, it's not.
Yeah,
because
there's always there's a connection there, 100%.
Yeah, because what you just did when you split the Russian Orthodox Church is you just said that this is no longer one country. This is no longer one nation with a diaspora. This is actually two different nations, and now Russia needs to invade because they're not secure anymore. See, when they were still under that unified religion, they could easily say that, oh, this is a unified country and we can't go to war. But now that they're two different religions, one's Russian Orthodox, one's Ukrainian Orthodox, these are not the same. Now they have to.
Yep. And by the way,
no exceptions.
I was just, a little shout out, like that kind of coverage that wasn't on a lot of pages, wasn't on a lot of news outlets. It was at beenawake.com because that I did cover precisely this in a timeline that makes sense. And I incorporated the religious element profusely because it all traces back to 988 with Vladimir the Great. And that is the cultural heart of both the Russian people and many of the Ukrainian people. For better or worse, right? And we're seeing the for worse right now. And of course, geopolitics plays a role, but there's a geopolitical element to the fact that Constantinople granted autocephaly to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church. So it's like, it's like these things aren't disconnected by any stretch of the imagination.
There's so many different examples here of of religion preceding political paradigm shifts. Fall of Rome, what preceded rise of Christianity? What did rise of Christianity bring with it? Monarchy and empire. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and we're seeing, but also we've witnessed the ascendancy of a new religion, a new progressive civic religion over the last couple of years. It has had such an effect. Right. It has had such an effect that people don't question it the way that people didn't question religion for most of human history.
And when you call it a religion, people are like, oh yeah, of course. Yeah, duh. It's like, they know it. It's like, its adherents will deny it. They'll be like, no, because their religion is no religion, theoretically.
Right. Because theoretically they've already rejected it. So the fact that
the fact that they're actually being complete hypocrites who don't know anything is like, that's unthinkable to them. But if you talk to anybody on the right and you say, wokeism really is a religion, like unironically it's a religion, and they'll be like, yeah, of course, I can see it.
In 2010, no, what was it? 2012, I wrote the words. I was like, it was the last time I did like a solo project, and one of my songs had. Dang it, sorry. Oh, but even so, they cannot keep the demons at bay. Missionary ideals in the concepts of today. Those who would destroy it to remake it in their image, trying to play God on the basis of no religion, something not from school, and it keeps me from believing is that liberty dies not among outcries, but thunderous applause.
Oh my God, that's really good.
Thank you. You can I can send you the mixtape.
That's gonna be a clip.
Yeah. But no, that was a song that I wrote. I wrote that in 2012, 2013. These religious ideas were evident there. I think again, I think maybe people, in particular, I would say maybe my anti-communism bias helped me with that. But that's maybe not giving myself enough credit. I always saw this religious element even as far back as almost a decade ago, whereas
Yeah.
now you can't even deny it.
By the way, this is how you change people's ways of thinking. Because when they have a new religion, that's when they actually change how they completely look at things. And what do all good religions have in common? They have a good system of metaphysics and a good system of epistemology. Makes sense. And if you're a libertarian, if you're a secular religion that rejects both, this isn't going to work. This is just going to end in chaos. But the benefit and the one, again, this goes back to our other show of They Have Uncrowned Him. You know what the one benefit of a secular religion is? It necessarily must impose itself. Its incentives are driven towards imposition. And so now with libertarianism, by the way, this works great with progressivism, because progressivism is all about, progress by force, whatever that means. It really just means force. The problem is really
and this new religion, it means drag queen story hour and drag queen performances at hockey games.
Or you're a bigot.
Or you're a bigot, literally. Yeah, no, like the Blackhawks just had like a drag queen figure skater like during one of their intermissions. And it's like, I don't know. I don't know, man.
In a hockey game?
At a hockey game. Like, again,
is nothing sacred to these people?
Like literally no, they're taking on the sacred, right? Because I'm not a big sports guy, right? But like I enjoy sport, and I'll always go watch a hockey game, especially when the Hawks are playing well. But like, to the point is, like, you have this apex of masculinity, right? Of sport and like and competition and winning and and all these things. And then, of course, we have to have, for intermission, some dude wearing oh, by the way, the girls who scrape the ice, they don't get to wear skirts anymore. They wear leggings, which, not a big deal. But like, but the drag queen figure skater
is wearing a skirt, of course.
Yeah, of course.
Fuck. It's like a sport which is all about masculinity, and of course you have an intermission which is the height of emasculinity, of emasculation.
And there's a part of myself that hates me for even bringing up and pointing this out, but it's just become so obvious and so ridiculous that I can't help but notice.
Well, it's like, again, because you can't help but notice it because they are imposing it on you. They fully believe in imposing their values, because this is the benefit of a secular religion, is that it makes it so easy to do this and so morally justifiable to do it. And so now with libertarianism as a secular religion, you've given up the one benefit you had, the one thing you had going for you as a secular religion of being able to impose yourself without any sort of pang of conscience. You gave that up. This is again why Christian libertarians are the only kind that really actually work, because they already have a Christian underpinning that makes it work. These are the only sort of people who could actually even begin to make it work. I mean, look at Ron Paul, Tom Massey, Rand Paul. What's the other guy? Mike Lee, who's in there right now. What do all of these libertarians who actually get elected, nearly all of them, have in common? They're Christians.
Yeah.
Basically all of them. Because it works. They already have that religious part of them filled that says, I actually need to go into the world and make disciples of all nations, and I'm actually here to civilize the world by loving my neighbor as myself. I have a real commandment that says I got to go do this, and and there's the hero mentality right there that you need for people like this. This is again where we're coming from with we need to seize power. Is that actually heroes use power? They don't say, "Oh, power is evil." And Superman never says powers are evil. I can't use them. It's like never did that. Lex Luthor certainly not. And so when you're just like at default, I don't need to know anything about power because power's bad. Rulers are bad. People who bring law and order to society are bad. And of course they don't actually, but this is what they mean by ruler. They even change these definitions, which might be helpful to them if they actually use them the way other people use them. But they change the definitions to be they change these definitions of words such that they're completely evil. State means completely evil. Ruler means completely evil. Anything that isn't anarchy means completely good. Nobody uses these words that way. So when you've changed their definitions you've definitionally locked yourself into a worldview that is completely different. But by the way, Marxists do the same exact thing.
Yes.
And the difference is they're willing to impose their way, and you're not.
Well, and I said the post-libertarian, the post-war prescription, the libertarian prescription to the post-war order is out of date, right? That is how we have to understand this. Because if everybody listened to Milton Friedman, right? If Milton Friedman had become king, the country would be a better place.
Oh yeah.
But with whatever faults you might have for Milton Friedman. That you understand, if Milton Friedman was able to actually wield power and implement all the things he wanted to implement and inculcate that within a population over a generation in schools, we would be in a much different situation. Instead, we are living through a time where the president who was elected via social media, Barack Obama, is speaking about how social media is a danger to democracy. How free speech is a danger to democracy, this God that these people worship. Those are the times that we live in. You understand? So these liberal Western democracies, they don't exist. The Constitution doesn't exist anymore. It might be something to recapture. It's difficult for older people to grasp that. I've said this a couple times to my Cuban elders. And they've said, and it's like, oh, how about it's on life support? I'm like, okay, it's on life support. It's like, all right, I get it. You came to this country, and the thought of it being lost in a generation is a problem.
Yeah.
But again, the President Obama, who used social media to get elected, it was the talk of Washington, how he was so good at it, right? Is saying social media is the problem, and that free information is a problem. That's the time we live in the name of democracy. Okay, fine. By the way, they can have democracy. Sorry, let me just finish the point. They can have democracy. I'll take free speech. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And if you don't see stuff like that, and if you don't understand the difference between the right and the right doesn't really want that kind of power. They never did, and they never fight for it. Not nearly the way the left does. And so when you see the left turn on a dime, Barack Obama gets elected as wanting to end the wars. What's he do? Starts 3 more disastrous wars, or was it 5 more? No, 5 more disastrous wars. And of course, why? Because once he got into power, the position that was marginally more powerful for him was to flip on that and start more wars, because that got him even more power. And if he started ending them, he wasn't going to get a second term. And and he didn't really care anyway. He wanted to focus on Obamacare and all that.
Well, and look what he ended up doing. What he did is almost even, and by doing that, it's even more insidious, right? Because then he, instead of doing formal wars, right, which have real consequences, i.e., Ukraine right now, he used intelligence, and he started to, and so he created he just killed a bunch of brown people overseas to borrow the left's language. Right, he let the CIA and all the secret organizations wage these proxy wars amongst people to feed this beast of the American empire. So to placate the powers that were and to increase his own power, he made this deal with the devil that in some ways is I would argue far worse. I mean, I don't advocate for war, don't get me wrong, but in a very ancient way, you might say it's more noble. It's more noble for the war. Yeah. So for what? Sorry.
At least declare the war, for God's sake.
Correct. Yeah. That there's a nobility in that you can at least respect if you don't agree with it. And again, this isn't a more maybe ancient understanding of that, I would say.
Yeah. And it's and at every turn, what does the left do with free speech? That's another thing. It's they use it as a weapon while it gets them power. And then when it no longer gets them power, when it starts taking power away from them, it's like, oh, no more of that. No, we don't need that anymore.
Yep.
It's like
separation of church and state means that you can't teach the Bible in elementary school, but it also means that you have to teach queer theory to kindergartners in my home state of Illinois, which Christopher Rufo just put out today.
Yep.
Literally worshiping the flags.
Mm-hmm. It's like, it's like, again, you have to see these things, and the right does not do the same thing at all. Yeah, with the right, hypocrisy is legitimately a bug. With the left, hypocrisy is the feature. Like, this thing is like, hypocrisy always favors the powerful. That's why for the right is a bug, because they're not really trying to go after power. It's like, some of them are.
Or powers for power's sake. That's powers for others' sake. Okay. Just to refine your point.
Yeah, that's a really good distinction. And if you're sitting here just wanting to make political statements and you just want to say, both sides are evil, the duopoly or whatever, it's like, this is useless. This is completely beyond useless to just say, and this is not what, this is not what inspired people about Ron Paul, is that, he wasn't simply making a political statement. He was out there to really embarrass them and really fight back against them and try to win power. I mean, like, he almost won New Hampshire, and he did until they took it from him. And like, he was like really doing well at the convention too in 2012. And like, he was really there to take power. He really was elected as congressman, like 12, 13 times, like 12-term congressman. He was a 12-term congressman. Like, he really got the power. He never like wielded it very well because he never got anything done. But he was still there. He had the power. He had the influence.
Yep.
And he was there. He was on the debate stage. It was only because he was a congressman that he was able to turn to Giuliani and have that famous moment.
Mm-hmm.
And
we remember, and people like that are remembered in history.
Huh?
The Patrick Henrys, the Ron Pauls, they're remembered in history, right?
Yeah.
And so are the George Washingtons and the Alexander Hamiltons.
Yeah, and the Jeffersons too. And but if you're in the LP, you're never going to get that kind of remembrance. Why? Because it's irrelevant. No one, like, who was the last guy? I mean, who was the guy in the Whig election where who was the candidate who was running against Lincoln as a Whig? I don't remember. He lost.
Top of my head.
He lost by a lot too. And it's like, we never remember the losers. We definitely, like, we might remember like famous moments, like Reagan against Michael Dukakis or something like that, and they just have like a memorable one-liner or something that's remembered for a few generations. But nobody remembers who the third party was. Nobody does, and they don't care. So you can't even get on the debate stage. So how are you even going to have another libertarian moment when the thing that sparked the first libertarian moment was Ron Paul getting up there and actually being as a successfully elected congressman 12 times, really turning it, who had been ideologically consistent, had been right on all of these issues, and got to say, "I told you so many different times." He was there. That's why the moment happened, why it worked out, why the Tea Party was what it was, and squandered. It's like we're not getting that the second time around. We're getting the same kind of image, but it's just an empty political statement now. It's not actually trying to go for power.
So if libertarians don't learn this message, and if they choose the path of political statements, which is the path of the LPMC, over the path of political power, the idea of human freedom will die within a generation. Nice little rhetoric.
Or at least their conception of it. Again, the ideas of liberty and freedom are very old. They go way back. It's like that, and those conceptions are quite different. They're like the pre-libertarian definition of liberty, or I should say the pre-liberal definition of liberty, was that you were free. It was the idea that it was the freedom to choose the good, because if you chose the bad, it carried an inherent loss of freedom with it. So that you could not possibly, be free to be less free. That's like saying I'm free to be bad means necessarily free to be less free. It's a contradiction in terms.
And I'll be honest, that last sentence is also like a little bit of like introducing scarcity and like, time's running out. But yeah.
And yeah, and so like their idea of liberty, because they've never acted on it, it's a politically sterile definition. It's going to fall away, and we're going to get the pre-liberal definition of liberty back, because that one actually works. So yeah, your concept of liberty is going to die in a generation because it chose political statements over political power. So if you chose political power like the progressives did, you might be the one saying that, like canceling people for not being real enough libertarians. Again, if you can imagine such a thing, it's like this is where we could have been had libertarians chosen power. Like,
Sure.
Yes, it's paradoxical, but yeah, we could have been there.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's also maybe a good point to be another point there would be that the people believed. I don't want to get too far down this because we're about to finish the piece. Okay, I'm going to save it. The basic point has to do with like people believing in liberalism where the progressives never did. So let's put a pin in that, because that's kind of where I'm going right now, as I've been listening to more like Orrin McIntyre and stuff.
Yeah.
So the prescription: if libertarians are to be the standard bearers of human freedom and liberty, they must evolve to suit the times. This begins by making ourselves better. In other words, clean your damn room. Put another way, secure your own liberty before trying to help other people. It is the egalitarian delusion of the left that says someone in their early 20s can affect political change the same as an established entrepreneur in their 30s. There is nothing simplistic or reductionist about beginning with self-improvement. Anyone who understands Austrian business cycle theory knows that a market correction will occur and that shortages won't be the worst economic issues of the next decade. If libertarians are the ones who can help their neighbors during hard times, people will notice that. You don't need to be a billionaire, but you do need to be stable and reasonably self-sufficient for people to listen to you. It's in our DNA. Without this first step, political power will continue to elude libertarians, and the world will sink further into this tyrannical chaos that is shaping the beginning of the 21st century. If you have accomplished the first step, the next step is easy. You either run a campaign, run for local office, or contribute financially to campaigns that are adopting the anti-tax framework and other radical measures to defend liberty. By contrast, the current LP strategy is designed to take over the bureaucracy of a party. In a business, a sale is what moves the needle. In politics, winning and holding office, in democratic politics, if we want to be precise, winning and holding office moves the needle. Put another way, your support staff is meant to help the war effort, not lead it. Most of human history is a wash. There are very few times where a dedicated minority can change the trajectory of humanity. The long march through the institutions have proven how easily you can change culture when you hold positions of power. In order to win the war, we must become personally ambitious and politically pragmatic for the cause of liberty. If this means losing the title libertarian as we lost the title liberal, so be it. I would rather be one of the free than the millions on their knees.
Same. MisesGOP.org/donate. It's like, again, like the next step is really, really simple. Run a campaign, run for local office, or contribute to those who are doing it. And focus on self-improvement for your 20s. Because again, libertarianism is a very young movement, because and again, this post-libertarian moment, this is not new. That usually people have had this sometime around their 30s when they getting married and having kids later in life. Yeah. Usually that's where it happens. You don't usually get old libertarians for precisely that reason, unless they're like really studied economists or something like that. That's where you would get it. You would still get it later in life. But most people who are politically libertarian grow out of it.
They still like, you still like Rothbard, you still like Mises, you're still a libertarian, but like you also just become maybe a dad, like you point out, or it's like, or I'm just, or if I'm really into politics, I'm gonna go like the most effective libertarians are already working in the Republican Party right now. I know
of them are
plenty.
fine.
I know of plenty of them, of people who at one point or another were very much like part of the libertarian, meet, and like, and then but they work in politics, and so they go the Republican route, right? And or like the more wonkish people, but then a lot of them tend to go in a little bit more of like a leftward direction as a result of like the nonprofit world and stuff like that. But to the point is, this was already happening, right? So it's just that it's that it happened for more people at once because of the lockdowns of 2020.
Exactly. And so, and like, this is why, as a young movement, it really makes sense, to focus on yourself first. And, which is a weird message coming from two Catholics. But for your 20s, focus on building yourself into the person you're supposed to become. Focus on building up your income, on building up your self-sufficiency, and getting your power in place, and then using it to fund the people who are doing the work you want to see done. Because let's face it, unless you're the one who really wants to run for office, we already have people who are like fundraising.
Well, this is the splash of water. This is the splash of water of saying like the bureaucracy isn't supposed to lead a movement.
Yeah.
Is like I've said a million times, I'm a media guy. That's the game I want to play. It's the game I've wanted to play for years. This, you can go back and talk to people who have known me my whole life. They know I've been interested in this kind of a thing. People have been asking me to run for office for a long, long time. So it's like, but I'm interested. I'm just more interested in media, right? So like, I'm very comfortable with, and that's I started Been Awake before I joined the LP and like tried the LPMC thing, and Been Awake is gonna live longer than the LP. But like, but to the point is, like the media game, if you want to play that game, okay, that's cool. Like, I'm down for that. The more the merrier, right? This would be slightly different than like the hobby podcaster who kind of just wants to do this because it's a fun way of like talking to different people and, maybe talking to like some academics you like at one point in time. But like, I'm interested in playing the media game for the long term, right? Like, I'm interested in building this, and I think I'm at a point now where I need to start expanding out and trying to write for bigger outlets to try and push this message that we're talking about here in the way that I can. That's complement, but if we're talking about
your strengths, it plays to your specialization.
Correct. But if we're talking about politics, you're not running the bureaucracy, like taking over the bureaucracy is not a fucking victory. It's just not. It's not a victory. It can't accomplish the thing you want to accomplish with it. The only thing that accomplishes anything in a democratic system is running and winning and holding office. Because even if you don't get any bills done.
Yeah. And like, I mean, look at Donald Trump. It's like, just by being there, he actually got a lot done. Like with, from immigration, trade, war, he got a lot done. It's like, well, did he get everything done? No. Did he, get Obamacare repealed? Yeah. It's like, he did. And I mean, he got the individual mandate repealed, which then got it struck down in court. So yeah, he did get it. It is gone. He kept a lot of good promises, and so like, yes, like getting power is the only thing that really makes a difference. Getting control of a bureaucracy in a third party makes zero difference. And so. And again, I like the way you put it in that next sentence, that in a business, a sale is what moves the needle forward. This is a sales job that you really should be going for. And the Libertarian Party is like, one, not selling anything, and the thing that they are kind of selling, nobody wants it.
Well, I can speak as a salesman. I haven't met a lot of salesmen in it.
Not at all.
Because you know what? I can tell you the exact moment where because I was on the fence back and forth, still willing to commit to at least getting to Reno and like helping people that I had met, because I liked a lot of the people I met in the LPMC. But I can tell you exactly where I was. I was in Cleveland at the Huntington Convention Center at a trade show for my job. And it was my first trade show since all the lockdowns. I had been traveling all the time, but this was like one of the first the second trade show. Oh, no, it was the first. Sorry. But anyway, point being, first trade show back. And I'm standing there and I'm looking, like, haven't had a few good interactions. A couple of good leads were coming in, like, all right, cool, this is going to be great. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, and then I like on Twitter and there's some drama happening, right? As there always is because it's Twitter. And I sat and I thought to myself, I said, self, if you do everything you can do, if you pour all of your talent and resources into the LP, where will you be in 2-3 years? How much money will you be making doing that? And the answer came back goose egg. The answer came back 0.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas if I keep doing my media stuff, it might not replace all my income, but I if you like, but beenawake.com/subscribe, you've become a patron. There's going to be a lot more premium content. It's going to kind of be my focus going forward. But it's but I could at least make a little bit, and certainly me devoting time to my main hustle of my sales job, my sales and marketing job, is making me a lot of money. Not a lot of money, more money than I was making a few years ago, right? Your point of getting your life in order in the 20s is such a good one, because I was somebody who didn't do as good of a job of that as he could have. And there are reasons for it that if you want my life story, I can give you over a beer sometime. Well, not a beer. I don't drink beer, but a whiskey for sure, or a bottle of wine. But like, to the point of it's don't fix the world, fix yourself. Get yourself in order and surround yourself with people who want to succeed and achieve, and you'll find inspiration in that.
I didn't get involved in politics until I got married.
Yeah.
It's like for me, it's like I had a stable job for for 4 or 5 years, and I was making good money, and I bought a house. I focused on myself. I had this idea for the anti-tax and everything I'm doing now with like corporate statecraft and privatization and all that stuff. I had that back in like 2017, and I didn't get involved in politics until April of 2021. And by then I'd been married for almost a year. I'd already bought a house, and I had it's like I'm married to my wife, and it was only like 6 months after that that we got pregnant with my sons, and we were already planning on kids. Like I had my life already all together, and like I didn't raise my first dollar, until after I knew I would. I didn't raise my first dollar with Mises GOP until like maybe 1 or 2 weeks before I found out my wife was pregnant. Yeah. And like that's how far along I was in my I'm 29 now. I was
going to say we're also both men speaking at the end of their 20s and seeing the value that stuff really, really provides, right? And
I think really provides a lot of value if you focus on that stuff first. And so we really do practice what we preach. It's like it's like I like my day job. I don't want to quit my job. I'm not making Mises GOPs as an excuse to quit my day job. Like somebody is, and it's it's like I don't need that. I really like what I do, and so I have no intention of quitting. Politics for me is always going to be like a side thing, and and if it really gets big, I'll hire a manager. I'd rather hire, and I already have like 1 or 2 picked out. That
I'd be lying that if tomorrow the Blaze or the Daily Wire, or somebody offered me a contract that I wouldn't take it. But in that I'm trying to work but really I don't need to quit my job. I just see it as a supplement. Writing and podcasting as a supplemental income. Now, given the political nature of my writing, if at some point of prominence, I'll have to, right? You kind of have to quit your day job, but to carry the point is like, I'm not trying to. Where, when I was selling suits, I might have been running away from something because that was kind of a dead end. That wasn't a career, right? It was just a job. But now, I'm comfortable. Like, in fact, if I probably wouldn't have started podcasting again if it wasn't for the lockdowns. I mean, just to your point, like I had worked out a lot of the stuff that I talk about vis-a-vis like practicing skepticism and like mindset and different philosophical insights. I was working that stuff out just for the fun of it. Right, because it's just kind of how my mind operates. But the sharing it and making it a priority came as a result of being more stable.
But and so that really is the Praxian prescription. Like focus on you for your 20s. Focus on your wealth, not just your income, also on your social wealth. your friends and your family, and building a family, and then build that into power. So when you have a real self-sufficiency, a real power base, you can do with that. It's like you can actually start using that. So and to influence the way the way the system actually works through specialization and people who actually do that for you. You use your influence, you use your money and your power to donate that to like people who actually are using it to get other people elected to positions of power that are actually going to make a real difference. Because let's face it, if we had I asked Dave Smith this question, when we had our discussion, I asked him, hey, would you rather have 1 million new libertarians or 10,000 libertarian mayors? If you could wave a magic wand, pick either or. He picked 10,000 libertarian mayors. I thought he would. I would too, because million new libertarians. What's the point? That doesn't do anything. If we had a 10,000 libertarian mayors, 2020 never would have happened. Not even close.
100%.
The lockdowns would have been dead in the water. It never happened. The whole COVID regime would have just been like nipped in the bud. 10,000 libertarian mayors, yeah, because there's only 19,500 municipalities in the United States. That's well over half. So it's like this is a completely different country if libertarians just took power. You just take even just like a small amount at a local government. One libertarian makes a big difference. We punch above our weight class.
Yeah. Forget libertarianism, right? This isn't about the ideas. This is a point about the people.
About praxis.
Mm-hmm.
It's about putting these ideas actually into practice, because they actually have quite a lot of good ideas, quite a lot of good social policies that we should be adopting, and we need to get those adopted. It really kind of goes without, you think it goes without saying, but no, it really does need to be said. And I don't mean make a political statement. I mean take that power. I mean take power. So,
and if you want to make political statements, play the media game, play the lobby. Do that. That's where that's you know what I mean. But don't pretend you're taking political power, which is also part of that section of the essay.
Yeah.
Don't pretend. Right. Don't take people's money saying you're going to win an election and you're going to make a change in the country when really you're just masturbating.